Greetings to our speakers. We have yet one to join us, which will be momentarily. My name is Camille Irens. I'm Institutional Sales Manager at Amundi. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so on 3 different perspectives regarding empowering social responsible investment post-COVID-19. We were a little optimistic with that title at the time, obviously with the second wave in process. However, before we start, I'd just like to give a few housekeeping. There is Q&A section in the bottom right hand of your screen, which we will be monitoring as we go through the session. And obviously we will try answering those as we go along or at the end, depending on timings. This session is actually being recorded so it will be available for the next 30 days if you'd like to come back and review it again. Also, please get engaged with the ACT on its social media, the exhibition hall, and there'll be many other track sessions throughout today. We also have Twitter at ACT Update, and you can tweet at #ACTAC20. So I'm pleased to introduce today's panel. We have from Amundi Caroline Meaux, who joined in 2019 as our head of ESG research, engagement and voting team. She was previously head of the long-term investment department at the Caisse des Dépôts et Consignations, where she was notably in charge of the SRI strategy, ESG and climate policy. We then have Benoit, who should be visually joining us shortly, who's our money market portfolio manager. He joined with CAM, which was the Crédit Agricole Asset Management, in 2006 as a money market trader, and in 2011 moved as portfolio manager on standard and short-term money market funds. Finally, but not least, we have joining us Ines Faden Silva, Group Treasurer at Tideway, a regulated utility, the company building London super sewer. Prior to Tideway, Ines advised and arranged financing for infrastructure and energy at Citigroup. So now I would like to hand over to Caroline to start with an insight into an overview of responsible investment history and rating system. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. My purpose here is to run you through what I will call the SRI jungle and give you a little bit of a view on where the investor stands. So if we go to just the reality of SRI is so complex because you have as many SRI view as asset owners somehow, and so you have different way to address this topic. But this is a growing market, which is currently more than 26 trillion euros, and is going really fast. You will see on slide 4 the market. Oh, and so on slide 4, Camille, if you can go on slide 4. So you see that it's a fast-growing market with a growth which has been over 34% over the last 2 years. So what is really important to understand there is that there is a different way of looking at things. If you go to slide 5, Camille, would be nice. So you have the different way of next slide. Sorry, there is different way of looking at things. You have first the people who are looking at SRI as being a way to look at risk. So they will surely concentrate on the downside of the portfolio, how to lower this downside risk. You have some other investors who are more in, they want to express their specific values on it. And you have this new development around impact, that is investors that want to have a specific impact on the real life, and it would be around the SDGs, for example. They would try, for example, to have a green impact through green bonds, or social impact through social bonds, for example. So there is this vast range of people of investors using SRI to express their needs that will end. And this is the reason why I was speaking about jungle, because on the SRI side, there is different way of looking at things, and you can't have only one response for all investors. You have to accept that when you are speaking with investors, they will have a different angles, but they have some common things to look at. So if you are looking at slide 6, there is usually 3 factors we are looking at, which is environment, social, and governance. Even though some of the investors might have more e-focus, usually on energy transition or some other climate-related topic. Some of them are very have a social angle, where they will look at different things, including healthcare, including fight against poverty. And then you have the governance issues, which is a more common way of looking at things. So if you go to slide 7, I wanted, so it's next is a slide after again. I just wanted to put a focus on what is a new trend in the SRI market, is that what we call the labels. There is in the European market more and more labels, local labels we have been developed. And those labels are creating some new way of looking at things, because they are, I mean, if you want to sell some product, you have to get those labels, and those labels give you what are the requirements to do SRI, and the different label will give you different requirements. And the thing is, they are quite demanding in terms of quality. So it means it's pushing, those labels are pushing the market towards more quality, more minimum level of requirement for SRI product. And why I'm mentioning it is because I think it's really important to know that the people who are meeting when you meet some investors, they are then push towards being more and more demanding in terms of SRI. So they will give you back this pressure and asking to give better KPIs, to be more transparent, to be more to have better targets. So you have the labels, which is one of the a very new, very ambitious phenomenon. And after, you have the regulators from in different countries, and even on the European level, you have more and more regulation that is pushing the investors towards more transparencies, towards having some better product and a level of SRI which is higher. And all this pressure coming from the financial market will end up being a pressure on the corporate, because the investors will need to ask for more disclosure from the corporate to more straightforward strategy. The new trend is to ask KPIs, the ESG KPIs that you have in your strategy to be embedded in the compensation package of the top management. There is very some pressure there to ask for more KPI, more disclosure, and even a level of maturity on ESG which is higher than, for example, 2 years ago. We can go to next slides. I wanted to do like a little bit of history there to give you where SRI come from. I think it's quite important to have this broad approach. SRI at the beginning was more an ethical approach, and it was really coming from the US. And so you had the first SRI funds were launched in the 20s in the US, and it was more about exclusion. And then you will have a development more in the 70s, still in the US, and after in the UK, where you had this the view that we could use the financial market to push for some view, like to the fight against apartheid. And after the real development went on 20 years ago with the creation of the first data provider, ESG data provider, as well as during the 15 years ago, the creation of the UN NFFI or the PRI. So this was slow at that time, and we have seen an acceleration of the trend over this last year, especially because the normal, it was only for specific investors, and now there is a trend towards taking into account ESG in all investment, even in the money market funds or very plain vanilla investments. This is true in Europe, but it's really true in Asia, where ESG is picking up, and even in the US, where the trend is a little bit not as strong as in Europe, in Asia, but there is still a lot of questioning on that field. This is an important trend coming, and it's not to it won't disappear very quickly. And at the end, I just wanted to show you on this next slide how we are looking to a company at Amundi, just to give you a sense of what is really important. On the environment side, what is really important is the way the company is looking at the climate change or any other pollution or its water consumptions. On the social pillar, we will look more about the labor relation, on the way you are managing your what we call responsible marketing. And for industrials, we will look at health and safety, obviously, and the link with the community. On the other very important side, we will look at ethics and corruptions. We look at the also at your fiscal policy, and really important also at the board structure. How balanced is it between independent board members and the others? And so that's the way we are looking at. The other thing we are looking at, which is really important, at controversies, because it's a good way to look at how a company is finally really putting ESG in place, and how serious this company is, even though even really good company have controversies. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. So now we're going to move across to Benoit, who's going to give a perspective as a portfolio manager and how to integrate ESG.
Yes, hello. Nice to attend to this panel. First thing to say is that I would like to define what is the goal of an asset management company concerning the ESG approach. And for asset management company, ESG approach is a part of a much more global awareness movement on environmental, on social, and on governance issue. This awareness is growing at the national level, with governments implementing stimulus packages focused on sustainable infrastructure projects, but also on an international level with, for example, the United Nations Global Compact or the European Union issuing green bonds. Asset management companies are fully part of this process and often have anticipated it, as funding is a strong leverage to make the boundaries move and to improve practices. In your private life, in my private life, I know exactly what to do to try to reduce my environmental impact. You recycle waste, maybe you ride a bike instead of driving to go to your work. It's not necessarily extraordinary actions. It's not necessarily big steps, but this is what we call the hummingbird's share. It is little but necessary. But once at work, what can you do to make things better? Sometimes it's not that obvious, depending on your activity. I'm lucky. As a money market fund manager, I know exactly that my activity, my professional activity, can have a positive impact on the environmental, on social and governance issues. And so asset management has a real positive impact with, I would say, bigger steps than what we can do on our private life. Money market funds account for 1,200 billion euro at the end of 2019. Sorry. A money market funds can invest up to 5% of its asset under management on an issuer. 5% of 1,200 billion euro is 60 billion euro. So it means that a company that, for example, produce anti-personnel landmines or exploit children deprive itself of 60 billion euro of potential funding. I deliberately exaggerate the line, but you can easily notice that this money can be used as an efficient leverage for improving environmental, social, and governance practices. Some maybe will object that money market fund investments are short-term investment, while ESG issues are medium and long-term ones, and thus that the impact is quite limited. That is true. That is true. As a money market fund manager, we invest on average on 3 to 6 months maturity, what is really short. But we renew this maturity, and so we provide to issuers that are eligible to our investment universe with recurrent and long-term durable funding. And so asset management companies can really influence practices in the ESG. The way we implement the ESG approach in our asset management is quite important and significant. As mentioned by Caroline, ESG approach is one of the pillars of Amundi management philosophy. This is really important here. Thus, extra financial analysis is an integral part of the quality assessment process of an issuer. Not only financial criteria is taken into account in credit analysis, environmental, social, and governance factors are assessed as well. Indeed, we know the risk induced by wrong practices in terms of environment, social, and governance impact on firm financial statements, maybe not on the short term, but surely on the medium and long term. It is clear that it will happen. And extra financial analysis can spot weak signal at a very early stage, the ones that can worsen and become really problematic in financial terms. So it is key for us to include this extra financial aspect in global analysis and in our management. At Amundi, each issuer has an internal risk code and a SRI, a socially responsible investment rating, going from A for the best to G for the worst issuer, for example, not complying with the Global Compact, UN Global Compact, for example. Companies that have an average F or G ratings are excluded from our investment universe. Those with one of the three criteria, environment, social, and governance, that are rated G. Sorry, there's a lot of Gs in my presentation. These issuers are excluded from our universe as well. So that quite limit and allow us to have a real impact. The guidelines that we have to follow or to comply with are also important. At Amundi, we follow, our funds follow an ESG mainstream approach. That means that portfolio needs to beat its benchmark. This benchmark constitutes the reference universe to which the portfolio is compared. For money market fund, for example, our benchmark is the ICE Bank of America Merrill Lynch 1-3 years index. The global ESG grade of our portfolio is calculated and compared to the benchmark and has to be higher than the one of the benchmark. To talk on a very practical way, when I have to invest on a specific issuer, what can I do? What I'm going to do? First, I will check in my system if I have the credit analysis team's approval, if my credit analyst granted me with limits in amounts and in maturity on this issuer. And if it is okay, that means that I can invest on this issuer. I will then compare the ESG rating of this issuer with the benchmark rating. And my goal will be, of course, to find issuer with a better rating than the benchmark in order to improve the portfolio grade. This is quite important. Just to sum up, I would say the three or the main key points of the ESG in asset management. The first point to mention is and to underline is diversification. Open-ended funds and especially money market funds provide a very high degree of diversification, and that is the first step to mitigate financial and also extra financial risks. The second point is the full integration of extra financial analysis and of ESG criteria in the credit quality assessment. Detecting weak signal in environmental, social, and governance aspects allow to foresee potential future financial issues. And the third point that I will mention that are really important for us asset manager is to always find the most relevant balance and balanced return risk couple. Risk in a broad sense, not only financial, but also extra financial risk. And so to find this most balanced ratio that fit to our customer need through a global credit quality assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Benoit. So I'm going to hand over to Ines now.
Thank you. And a little bit, I'll tell a little bit of Tideway and how we got into discussing social responsible investment and the ESG matters. So, Camille, if we could go to the next page, and I'll just tell a little bit why the reason of why Tideway came about, because this is a relatively new company, it's only 5 years old, and London is one of the last cities in Europe that has a problem with pollution in its main river, in the River Thames, and it is sewage. You know, the Victorians built a beautiful system that is still working today, but they built it for a city with 4 million people. London is now 8 million and counting, and you know, we will wash more. We've paved our gardens, and so there's no way there's enough space for all this rainwater and the sewage to go to. So the system was designed that when it overflows, it goes into the river. And you may not believe, but on average, we have about once a week, there's a discharge into the river of untreated product, let's say. And so something had to be done, and the Tideway element of this multi-year improvement plan. And the next one, Camille, please.
Sorry, there's just a slight delay, just so you know.
Yeah, no, don't worry, I can see it. So what we're doing here is building a tunnel. It's a massive tunnel. It's 8 meters in diameter and 25 kilometers long that goes from West London to East London. And we will simply be intercepting all that wastewater and sewage that would go into the river, and we take it to East London to be treated. So this project was very much created to address a sustainability issue. Maybe the next one, please. What we like to say is that, you know, this is the challenge. This challenge is to build this tunnel to prevent this frequent pollution, but we also have an ambition that goes above that. And we have a vision of connecting London with the river. Imagine what a city can do when we have a clean river. And we're also very conscious that we have a 10-year project going through 14 boroughs in London. You know, we're bothering a lot of people on the way, and so it's very important that we give back to the communities as much as possible. And we had a unique opportunity during these 10 years that we're very present in the city. Next. So we set out to create a legacy program in addition to the very heavy civil construction and engineering project. We have an ambition to leave a legacy for London and in a number of areas. And this was a little bit before the Sustainable Development Goals, and you will see that we've now aligned them. But at the time, we were thinking in 5 different areas: whether it be economy, environment, health, safety, and well-being, people, and place. And what can we leave behind, and how can we engage with these communities? I'm not going to go through each one in particular, but we have 54 commitments that we've been tracking and that we've been reporting on. Maybe I'll just give you a couple of examples on the social side. We have commitments both for us and for our contractors in terms of hiring not only local people, but people with convictions, apprentices, women. They have to hit these targets, and we report against these. So maybe the next one. And so that brings us to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we started with this vision, we looked at our purpose, we looked at all these objectives, and then we have eventually mapped all these against the Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, we're not meeting all these goals, and the goals were created in a first instance for governments to pursue policies, but there's a lot that corporates can do. And for us, as important as looking at the things where we're meeting and where we providing a positive contribute, we've also started looking where are we providing a negative, having a negative impact, and what we can do about it. Next, Camille, please. So here we have mapped the 10 Sustainable Development Goals that we believe that we're contributing to. And the first two, the large ones, obviously one is, is clean water, and then goal 11, which is sustainable cities. And in the long term, when the project is finished and we leave all these working sites, this is what we'll leave behind. But as I said, doing this long construction, there's a lot of other things we're doing. And so we have these other related goals and all the work we're doing with our workforce and with the communities that we serve. And Interestingly, we have undertook social value study of the return on investment, and we're now doing a major update, should be ready in a year or two. And the outcome was that for each pound that we invest in these legacy commitments, there's a social value of more than £3, which is makes you think. On to the next one, please. So now this then brings us, what about the financing? So it was only very natural that we would align our financing with the company's mission. And so we've approved the green bond strategy initially. We then expanded it to a sustainable financing strategy. We've issued 17 green bonds. Our revolving credit facility is indexed to the KPIs that we've set out in these legacy commitments. And importantly, we are reporting to investors on impact of the project and how we're locating the proceeds. I think there's an entirely new session we could have just on reporting, but I'll just leave it there. Maybe the last slide, Camille. So linked to the financing, obviously we looked at I think second party opinions on our financing, but recently the world has been around for a while, but a lot more focus has been given on ESG ratings, and there's all those unsolicited ratings that corporates have to deal with, but there's also ratings that corporates can work with. And recently this year we have obtained an ESG assessment from Standard & Poor's. In a way, it brings together not just what we're doing on financing, but all that we're doing at a company level, and is another important reporting tool to our investors and other stakeholders. And finally, will get me to investment. We look at not just our financing, obviously it has to all our financing counterparties need attention, and starting with investment, we can't just say our financing is very green and then we have no idea where our own money is invested. And so we look at where we put our money, and we look, I think, as Camille was pointing out, there's both the risk element, but there's the opportunity element. It's difficult, obviously, as a corporate. We have bank deposits and money market funds, short-term money market funds, and there's limited ability in terms of flexibility those funds can do. The majority of the holdings are short-term financials. But still, we look not just at product level, we look at the whole counterparty level, because you wouldn't want to have a very shiny green product with a counterpart that is very suspicious activities or just very poor governance overall. But it's still a relatively new area, that there's no standard, that there's no easy way to find out how our counterparties are doing. And so what we've been doing is we've started a dialogue with these counterparties, and we just keep talking to them. And our dialogue with Amundi is a very good example. It's probably a shining light in this space, but there's more to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ines. So maybe a question for the floor, because actually being three different perspectives, it'd be quite interesting in this sort of climate where we've got, impending negative rates, COVID-19, as well as Brexit now that's resurfaced. How do you keep focus on your long-term investments and the sort of responsible investments? Maybe Ines, if you want to start with that one.
Nice. There's interesting question. And I think it's been discussed that in difficult times, you just focus on the essential and you drop everything that is seen as non-essential. And here is where we start. We can no longer say that responsible investment or ESG considerations are non-essential. They're very much center plate, and we need to keep them in mind. If nothing else, as we discussed earlier, there is a risk element. And I think there's been sufficient data in the past 6 months that companies that have performed well from an ESG perspective have performed well overall, both in terms of their equity and their debt. So I'm positive that we will not lose sight of our long-term objectives.
Brilliant, thank you. Maybe Caroline, Benoit, if you want to share as a research from the research perspective, as well as obviously as a portfolio manager in this time.
Yes, in fact, before the COVID period, the S part was more, it was more difficult to see how concrete it was, because it was more around value. Like we thought it was good to have a good labor relations, or to have good health and safety processes. But with the COVID period, we find out that it could be very concrete and have a very large and very short-term impact for some of the companies. And yes, I truly believe that it will make the social pillar, and the fact that there is some minimum requirements on the on the company. It will put a light on it and the value of it, compared to the company which doesn't have this minimum level of social consideration in their business management.
Interesting. Benoit, maybe?
Yes, I completely agree with Ines and Caroline. As already said, ESG issues are medium and long-term issues that will not be fixed overnight. And so we need to tackle them right now. The COVID period was maybe people want to focus on what is essential and their business or core business, but I think we can not do without focusing on ESG that allow us to foresee what is going to happen next. And so these issues, environment, social, and governance, are key issues even in the COVID period.
No, very interesting. Very right. We've got a few questions from the audience, so I'd like to start with Ines, one coming your way. What were the main factors that helped Hideaway incorporate social responsibility investment in your investment strategies?
So I'll talk just about it. Cash investment. It's kind of at the short end of the spectrum, money funds. Well, one, the whole company has a sustainability ethos, and very early on we started aligning our financing. So we really couldn't have a situation where we were very active on the financing side and we didn't know what was happening on the investment side. But equally, we just thought, well, ignorance is never a good thing. We need to know, in a world that is changing, in a world where ESG is becoming so important, we need to know how our counterparts are doing, how they're thinking about it, how they're going about designing or changing their products. And eventually, I imagine in the long run, we're after improved performance there as well.
That's a good point. I have one for Amundi. Do you expect an acceleration of social responsible investment as a result of this year's event? Maybe one for Benoit, seeing as you're seeing on a portfolio manager's aspect.
Yes. Yes, we do expect. We are the implementation of social responsible investment is an ongoing process at Amundi. This is really a pillar of Amundi philosophy of management, and so we are working more and more so that more the majority of our funds become or follow this let's say a more demanding approach in terms of ESG. All our funds are already ESG mainstream, as I mentioned earlier, but we are going to try to improve and to improve this approach to make it more demanding.
Caroline, do you want to share a point on that question as well from the research side?
I think the trend start more like a year ago or 2 years ago, where more and more, I mean, the asset owners were more, I mean, the use of ESG is getting something quite common. It comes from the regulation first, and it comes by a trend in the market. The regulation first, because there is more and more regulate asset owners. It could be regulation, or it could best practices, like, such as the UK stewardship codes, that push the asset owner to publish, to be more transparent, to say what they are doing with ESG. And that's why they will push the market. They will ask for more ESG. So, you know, there is a combination of the regulation on the asset owners, as well as the more regulation concerning the disclosure as to the companies. So it's both, but I think it started a year before the COVID, and the COVID is just confirming something that was already there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, maybe I'm conscious we've only got a couple of minutes left, but maybe for yourself and obviously Ines, having gone through it, would you have recommendations to you know, corporate clients out there and the actual ESG reporting to help them?
Yes, I think that the first thing is, but maybe Ines will be a better place than me, but because there is a lot of requirements, different view, maybe the first things to do is having some, I mean, engage with their main shareholders or main debt holders to have a sense or what is the view of their shareholders or their debt holders on their ESG quality, in order to better analyze where they have to be more transparent or give more data or even have a better strategy. I think that's the best way to do that. Usually ESG investors are quite eager to meet companies and explain what are the view of the company. So I would probably start like this. And there is some best practice also companies. You can look at the reports of some of your peers that are already quite advanced.
Absolutely. I mean, Ines, you mentioned it earlier, we could have a whole session on reporting. So
yes,
maybe you want to share a few recommendations on your perspective.
Well, I'll just be very brief. We don't have much time. I think you know, Caroline is right. It's very important to engage with investors, shareholders, and other stakeholders. There's a lot of reporting standards out there. We need to keep focused. There's a huge thirst for data, and it's becoming very distracting in the corporate, having to provide all that additional data, but at the same time recognizing, and we're finding best ways of doing it in a way that responds to investor interest, because investors don't want fluff, they want hard data, but the way that doesn't distract the company. And you know, for us, we like to be one step ahead of regulation. You know, Caroline said that there's a wall of regulation coming our way, but it's much better to do it in our own pace when we have the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much to all our speakers. It was very interesting. Hopefully our audience, we answered as many questions as we could. Just maybe a few closing remarks. This session, as I mentioned, is still available for the next 30 days. If you missed it and you want to watch it, do come and visit the stands. We also have our exhibiting stand with further information that you can find on ESG Inclusive. And obviously, please answer the Q&A survey afterwards. Thank you very much.